If you like your heroes rough-edged and razor quick, this one's for you. Allan Grice was the bloke who in the early Group C and Group A years hauled privateer Holdens into fights they had no right to win, set the first 100-mile-an-hour lap at Mount Panorama, beat the factories on their own turf, and then, just to prove a point, came back in factory colours to do it again. This is the story of Grice, privateer folk hero, works team assassin, and one of the great hard chargers of Australian touring car racing. Allan Maxwell Grice was born on 21st of October 1942, and by the mid-60s he was already chasing speed. He started racing in 1966, working his way through the Australian scene the hard way, learning to hustle, to conserve, and to intimidate when he had to. Before he was a Bathurst headline, he was a sports-sedan star, a category that rewarded ingenuity as much as brute pace. In 1978 he took the Australian Sports-Sedan Championship in Frank Gardner's Chevy Corvair, then defended it in 1979. Back-to-back titles that announced a driver with serious car control and a taste for overpowered machine. In the years before he became a touring car hardman, Grice's grounding was broader than many remember. Educated at the Armidale School, he started racing in 1966 and was tackling Mount Panorama by 1968, getting an early taste for the long-distance craft. Crucially, he also spent time in open wheelers. In 1972, he contested the Australian Formula 2 Championship and finished sixth overall, driving a Mildren, running a Waggett and England Power across the season under the Max Stewart Motors banner. That stint sharpened his racecraft and mechanical sympathy, the sort of precision that later made his big-bore Holdens deceptively tidy over a stint. By the time the Torana era dawned for him in the mid-70s, he wasn't just quick, he was rounded, ruthless, and ready. In the 1975 Australian Touring Car Championship, Grice won rounds at Calder and Oran Park in an L34 Torana and looked every bit a title contender. Then came controversy at the Surfers Paradise, a disqualification for a technical infringement, an appeal, and ultimately the loss of points from the remaining rounds when the appeal was dismissed. It was a bitter pill. Grice had the speed to take it to the established stars, but it also foreshadowed the way he'd race for the next decade, never backing down. At Mount Panorama, he was already a problem for the establishment. In 1978, he finished second in a Craven mild-backed A9X Torana with John Leffler, behind Peter Brock and Jim Richards. It wouldn't be the last time he'd stand on the Bathurst podium, and it wouldn't be the last time he'd do it in a car his crew had sweated over without the protection of full factory resources. The early 80s were peak Grice. After a failed association with Frank Gardner's factory BMW team, Grice aligned with Les Small's Roadways outfit, a fiercely capable privateer operation that turned VH and VK Commodores into giant killers. In 1982, his outright pace erupted at Bathurst. He took pole position, his only Bathurst pole, and in doing so became the first driver to lap the mountain at an average of over 100 miles per hour, a psychological barrier as much as a statistical one in that era. When the dust settled on race day, he shared second place with Alan Brown. In 1983, he was back on the podium in third place with Colin Bond. The privateer was now a permanent yardstick. Grice's touring car ledger from those years shows why he was so feared on Sundays. He won multiple championship rounds from the mid-70s Torana wins to a famous victory in the very last touring car race under the Group C era at Adelaide in 1984, beating the likes of Peter Brock and Dick Johnson to the flag. That same year he dominated the Australian GT Championship in the ex-Bob Jane Decon-built Chevy Monza, asserting a versatility that few touring car specialists could match. He even won the final proper Group C race in Tasmania, albeit a non-championship round, at Baskerville later in 1984. The stat merchants will tell you he ended up with 10 touring car round wins in total. The message really is simpler. If Grice was in the lane beside you, you'd better have bought everything. By 1986, the Roadways cars were so well sorted that Grice and businessman Graham Bailey took their Chickadee yellow VK Commodores to Europe for the European Touring Car Championship, often out-qualifying the factory Holden dealer team and giving the big continental squad sleepless nights. It was old-school privateering with a modern ruthlessness. And then came the day that made the myth, Bathurst, 1986. The field was stacked with works cars and heavyweight imports. But Grice and Bailey had a less small-built VK that could run hard, lap after lap. They didn't just win, they dominated, leading all but 12 of the 163 laps, and with Grice himself driving a marathon stint of 137 laps. It was the ultimate privateer victory, meticulously prepared, ferociously executed, and wildly popular. Ask him which of his Bathurst wins taste sweeter, and he'll say 1986 every time because they kicked the factory's ass. Fans felt the same. Privateer victories at the mountain have a special kind of romance, and the Chickadee triumph tapped straight into that. He was a driver who'd been sniping at the factories for a decade, finally standing on the top step because he and his tiny crew had outdriven and outprepared the giants. Repco's own retrospective calls it one of the archetypal privateer performances at Bathurst, a day when guile and grit carried the day. Fresh from the mid-80s highs, Grice took his aggression stateside. He took his elbows out style to stock car racing, making 2 Winston Cup starts in the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte, debuting in 1983 in the 03 Oldsmobile and returning in 1989 with the Foster's back number 47 Pontiac, classified 35th and 34th respectively, after mechanical trouble cut both runs short. Back home, he was a front-runner in the pioneering NASCAR events at Bob Jane's Calder Park Thunderdome, notably qualifying third in the inaugural Goodyear NASCAR 500 in 1988, before a brake failure triggered a heavy shunt that left him with a broken collarbone. Pure Grice, fast, uncompromising, and unafraid to test himself in new arenas. In 1986, Grice sealed the People's Privateer, but in 1990 it made him a factory assassin. After a brief foray with the factory Nissan team and their GDSR Skyline in the European and British Touring Car Championships, along with some World Sports Car Championship rounds including Le Mans, Grice joined Tom Walkingshaw's fledgling Holden racing team in 1990, set up and managed in Australia by the ever-quick Englishman and former Nissan teammate Wyn Percy. They arrived at Bathurst in 1990 with the VL Commodore SS Group A SV. On paper they were underdogs to the turbo hordes. Nissan's new GDR and the Cosworth Sierras had been slicing through the Touring Car Championship season. But Bathurst does not read press releases. Percy and Grice drove a spirited race tempo from the off, kept the car clean, nailed the strategy, and beat the turbos to the line. HRT in their first year of operation had won the great race. It was an improbable as it was emphatic. In 1991, a year after their win, the HRT pairing chasing the all-conquering Nissans home again in second place. Then in 1992, as Group A started to give way to Australia's new 5-litre formula, Percy and Grice finished 5th overall and won class for the 1993 spec V8 cars. A tidy, transitional flourish before the V8 supercar era truly took hold. So what made Gricey Gricey? Start with his hands. He was fast, yes, but it was the type of fast that got under opponents' skin. A relentless elbows-out pace that refused to fade over a stint. He could lead an endurance race at a sprint race tempo without chewing the car to bits. He was also uncompromising out of the car, famously outspoken, allergic to nonsense, and never afraid to call out rivals or officials. Auto Action summed up the mid-80s mood neatly. If Peter Brock had a nemesis, it was Allan Grice. That wasn't hype, it was lived experience for the eras of the stars of the day. Yet the privateer tag didn't mean small-time engineering. The Roadways Commodores and later the HRT VL were proper race cars with the little things done right. Grice's long stint pace at Bathurst in 86 only works if you've got brakes, fluids and tyres all under control. And his 1990 pace with HRT only makes sense if the team, in its first season, had built something bulletproof enough to take a pounding from lights to flag. Both were true. Let's zoom out and take stock of the championship picture. Through the Group C and Group A years, Grice put together a portfolio of touring car championship success that would make modern headline drivers very comfortable. 10 touring car round wins across his career, ranging from the early Torana days to that historic Adelaide finale in 1984. The point isn't a single title, it's how often he was the quickest man on a Sunday, even when the badge on his overalls didn't say factory. The Bathurst record is even more revealing. Between the late 70s and mid-90s, he racked up 7 podiums, second in 78, again in 82, third in 83, the famous win in '86 and in 1990, and second in 1991, and another second again later as co-driver in 1995. 2 wins, 5 other podiums, 26 starts in the great race. Few drivers have threaded the mountain so often and so well. And if you think he was just a Bathurst and Touring Car Championship specialist, remember the production car marathon that revived endurance racing at the mountain in the early 90s. In 1991, he and Peter Fitzgerald had won the inaugural Bathurst 12-hour in Toyota Supra Turbo, making Grice the first driver to win the Bathurst 1000 and 12-hour at Mount Panorama. It's a neat footnote that also speaks to his adaptability across categories and compounds. By the mid-90s, the V8 era had reset the competitive order. Grice wasn't a full season lead driver anymore, but on the biggest day, he was still a driver you wanted in the car. In 1994, he co-drove with Stephen Johnson at Dick Johnson Racing, a blue chip seat, and they brought the Falcon home in 7th. A year later, he teamed up with 1980 Formula One world champion Alan Jones at Philip Morris's Peter Jackson Racing, and very nearly stole the trophy, finishing second in 1995 after a race that ebbed and flowed until the last handful of laps. That's Grice in a nutshell. When the mountain turned savage and experience mattered most, he was still there at the end. The following season, he and Jones went again, this time in the Pack Leader Racing Falcon. The result wasn't there, a DNF in 1996, but the logic was sound. If you'd build a car you thought could last 1,000 kilometres, you rang Allan Grice. And that's the duality that makes his story sing. On one hand, he is the quintessential Bathurst privateer, Les Small's Roadways Magic, the Chickadee Yellow, the 137-lap hammer blow in 1986. And on the other hand, he's the pro who slotted straight into HRT's first-year program and put a VL Commodore on the top step in 1990 against the very cars that were redefining the category. Auto historians often separate privateer and factory eras. Grice blurred them, proving that a hard-charging mindset with sound engineering could topple anyone, and then proving he could do it from inside the factory too. What cements Grice's legacy isn't just the silverware, it's where and how he won. He broke the mountain's psychological ceiling in 1982 with that first 100-mile-per-hour lap. He broke the factory's hearts in 1986 by leading 151 of the 163 laps in a true privateer Holden. And he broke the form guide in 1990 by helping a brand new HRT outfit pull off one of the most unexpected victories of the Group A era. That's not coincidence. That's a career built on racecraft, mechanical sympathy, and a refusal to accept that a badge dictates your place in the queue. Of course, there were the near misses that deepen the legend. The 1975 Touring Car Championship tangle with the rulebook, the countless Bathurst campaigns where a $2 part cost a $200,000 payday. But nothing about Allan Grice's career invites pity. It invites respect. This was a driver who fought the biggest names of his age to a standstill, who drove like the stopwatch was lying, and who eked out results in cars that weren't supposed to be there, then climbed into the official works entry and did it all again. In the end, when we talk about Allan Grice, we're really talking about a philosophy of racing. Give me a good, honest car, give me a crew that cares, and give me a mountain, and I'll give you a fight. 2 Bathurst wins, a fistful of podiums, championship Sundays won with privateer hands, and a place in Australia's motorsport folklore that no statistic can fully explain. That's Grice, that's why he mattered, and that's why we'll keep telling his story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Racing Chronicles. We've got plenty more stories coming your way, so stay tuned for the next chapter in racing history. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.